today we're taking a look at some diseased forces of Nurgle, with 3 different and powerful army lists from the Death Guard. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're going to be looking at a few strong Death Guard army lists, and talking about a few different flavours of the way that Nurgle can make its presence felt on the battlefield of 9th. I think Death Guard, like quite a lot of codexes, are certainly feeling the creep of the new releases. When their codex first dropped, they were arguably one of the most powerful forces in the game, though that perhaps didn't stay the case for long, seeing as Drakarian Admech came out shortly after. At the moment I'd say they are maybe a bit more of an upper mid-tier codex, certainly still have some very scary builds and powerful units, but perhaps not topping the most competitive tournaments all that frequently. In this video I thought we'd look at 3 fairly different Death Guard army lists, each of which perhaps shows off a different facet of the faction. We'll start with the Mortarion List, then go on to some serious heavy firepower, and finish up with a Poxwalker Horde. So the first list is a Mortarion List, and this was one of Death Guard's Grand Tournament wins, played by Michael Fox to take first place at Wars on the Shores GT 2021. The list is made up of Mortarion himself, plus a Mortarion's Anvil Battalion. Mortarion I still think is a solid enough choice, though I think it's always going to be a different kind of army when you're including just one big hitter at a quarter of your points. It does give you the potential to either win big or lose big, depending on whether he can catch any important stuff, or whether or not he gets focused down a bit too early. In any case, Mortarion here takes the Miasma of Pestilence and the Gift of Contagion, and he has the Gloaming Bloat Plague Company traits, probably the best general purpose one, giving him a rather large aura of no rerolls to hit or wound, really very powerful against quite a lot of things, including virtually any characters, and common things like Space Marine Lightning Claws. Then to support him we have the Mortarion's Anvil Battalion, again certainly one of the stronger plague companies, if not the strongest. They have that Relaptic Assault stratagem, the one that for one command point allows your units to heroically intervene. Pretty nice and fairly excellent for scrapping over objectives. You actually have to fight the Terminators and things if you want to go up to them. For the characters, in the HQ slot we have a Lord of Virulence. He just appears to be unupgraded and providing some rerolls, and a Malignant Plaguecaster who takes Curse of the Leper. Quite a nice one against low toughness models, and presumably something else, but I couldn't see it listed on the army list. In any case, he's going to be kicking out a fair amount of mortal wounds. We then have the near auto-include combination of the Foul Blight Spawn with Revolting Stench Vats, and the Taliban with the Tollkeeper Relic. It seems pretty rare to see a Death Guard list that don't include these 2 characters. They're about as auto-include as it gets, I guess. The Blight Spawn and those Stench Vats means that if you charge them, the Death Guard is still likely to fight first. With a big 6-inch aura, that's absolutely massive, and it means that he can defend the Terminators and characters really well. Never mind the fact that he's got a very dangerous Plague Sprayer Flamer attack too. That's going to punch with some bite as well. The Taliban and Tollkeeper are just great on several levels, a bit of really easy command point farming, and combine that with +1 to hit for 1 unit and exploding 6s to hit as well, and there's virtually no Death Guard list where that isn't going to be worth the points. For squads for them to lead, we have a big squad of Blight Lord Terminators with Bubotic Axes. That could be a decent unit for 4 rerolls from Mortarion perhaps, and it's going to be a seriously tough unit to shift if it does park itself on a midfield objective. For some counter-attack punch, the champion also takes the Plague Skull of Glothilla, a really very easy include for 1 command point this. Getting something like 4 or 5 mortal wounds on average out of a single grenade attack is pretty spectacular. Then we have 2 units of 10 Poxwalkers, good for actions, objectives and screening. An interesting choice of 10 Plague Marines with a single Blight Launcher. It doesn't seem that the standard Plague Marines are quite as favoured compared with Poxwalkers or Terminators in quite a lot of Death Guard lists that I see, so pretty cool that they've been able to make them work, and in a seriously good number as well. And then rounding up with a fairly cheap and dangerous threat of 3 Death Shroud Terminators, and then 2 Plague Burst Crawlers to hold up the rear. I think these small squads of Death Shroud Terminators are very rarely a wrong choice in a Nurgle list. Just over 150 points for some very tanky Terminators, character protection shenanigans, and some pretty meaty combat damage when they do make contact, and kind of similar for the Plague Burst Crawlers. For their points cost you get a lot of value, a really tough tank with some decent anti-tank fire with those entropy cannons, and some good quality shooting that ignores line of sight, potentially getting you damage 3 and mortal wound splash damage with disgusting force. Overall, I think as a support to Mortarion, it's really quite a balanced list with several things going on, and makes use of a lot of the nastiest threats in the Death Guard Codex. Moving on, let's take a look at a very shooty army list, one that I've seen run in a fair few slightly different combinations. Again, we're using the Mortarion's Anvil Plague Company, both for the Gloaming Bloat and the Warp Insect Hive, and Relaptic Assault if we need it. The defining thing about this list are 3 Contemptor Dreadnoughts with the Volkites and the Cyclone missile launchers, paired with 3 Plague Burst Crawlers or with twin Entropy Cannons. That alone is just a serious firebase right there. A fairly hefty punch of anti-tank with all of those Entropy Cannons and missiles, and having 3 Plague Burst Crawler mortars on the field means that you can put some hefty firepower down on any unit on the board, hopefully combine some fire to snipe something important that was out of line of sight. Then combine that with the general purpose hoover of all of those twin Volkites, and they should be taking out a fair amount of the enemy infantry or just stacking more mortal wounds on heavies if they're needed. To support this fairly fearsome gun line, we have a lot of the same characters. The Tallyman with Tollkeeper is absolutely excellent in combination with those Contemptor Dreadnoughts, and we'll plan to just sit around escorting those around as they move. We've then got a couple of really quite fighty characters in a Demon Prince with Wings, Hellforged Sword, and Miasma of Pestilence, and he's basically an all-around murderous beatstick of a unit as he takes the Warp Insect Hive, casually allowing him to reroll all hit and wound rolls in combat, so it is going to be fairly unusual for him not to get something like 5 or 6 wounds on the enemy. That's paired with Rotten Constitution as well for the 5+ Feel No Pain he has, so he's a pretty good all-rounder between his buffs, miasma, and his pretty hefty melee threat. Next up there's Lord of Contagion taking a Plague Reaper and the Gloaming Bloat. He's also spectacularly dangerous in melee, and pairs really nicely with the Death Shroud Terminators and the Foul Blightspawn, a little trio that can't be shot until you've gone down the Terminators, and they might well be lurking in cover. They can all heroically intervene, the Terminators with their stratagem, and the Blightspawn should hopefully have enemies fighting last. When those 3 make it onto a midfield objective, they can be seriously quite hard to shift if you can't shoot the Terminators well, or if you need to deal with them in assault. Finally, squads-wise, we have 2 squads of Death Shroud Terminators, solid little units to protect the characters and have some massive countercharge threat, and then hopefully for winning the mission we have 2 squads of Death Guard Cultists and 2 squads of Poxwalkers, the Cultists just being used for more chaff that can be used to do actions, and there's only a couple of Death Guard core choices on the board with this many characters and vehicles about. They can do things like spread the sickness, and maybe the Poxwalkers do a little bit of reanimating to gain some movement, maybe sneaking onto objectives and doing some gamey things like that. Overall, I think that this one just shows how surprisingly shooty Death Guard can be. It can be quite nice for secondaries, as you can take things like Spread the Sickness and To the Last with the Plague Burst Crawlers, and hopefully you'll be able to hoover the foes off the objectives with all the shooting, and then a determined countercharge from the Terminators and the Commanders. I've actually faced 2 very similar versions of this list myself at tournaments. It seems like with all the similarities between the 2 lists, it does seem like a pretty popular build for Nurgle right now. Certainly a lot more dynamic damage than a bunch of Death Guard lists do bring, but does kind of come at the cost of not having so many bodies for objectives. That particular weakness though certainly isn't one of this last list, and this one's a Poxwalker Tide list, built around the very scary Harbinger's Terminus Est assault force, which just take hordes of Poxwalkers to the next level entirely. Poxwalkers I think are one of Death Guard's most efficient units, 5 points for that level of toughness, and being able to flex into some mortal wound damage for a command point is great, and this list really goes all out to get as many of them on the board as possible. The Terminus Est assault force allows you to deep strike units if you need to, it forbids you from using demon engines, and perhaps more importantly gives you access to some really powerful stratagems for Poxwalkers, things like getting them faster movement, regenerating depleted squads and having them move on from the side of the board, and you can combine that with the massive damage that they can already do with Harbingers. For 2 command points, one of these 20 blobs of Poxwalkers could easily be spitting out something like 11+ mortal wounds. The list is mainly built around these 5 massive squads, 5 units of 20 Poxwalkers, definitely going to be putting a strain on the enemy's anti-infantry if they don't have enough, particularly having a few command points to reanimate some. Those Poxwalkers are allowed with 5 different core units of Terminators, 3 units of 3 Death Shroud. They'll do what they normally do, be very tough, very threatening, and protect the characters, and 2 units of Blightlord Terminators with axes, 1 unit in each squad taking a Flail of Corruption. Most of those would start on the board, maybe 1 or 2 might be tempted to deep strike depending on the opponents. Then to lead them into battle there's a fairly decent cast of characters, the normal combination of the Foul Blightspawn with the Stench Vats and Tallyman with Tollkeeper, a couple of Malignant Plague casters, one of them's a seriously annoying debuff character, taking Long Rot and Rot Wind from the discipline from the Terminus Est assault force. Long Rot is a combat one, meaning that you can only declare charges on very close units, and Rot Wind decreases the AP of your attacks by 2, and that could be absolutely massive on a melee unit that's going to be confronting Terminators, as it might well mean that they're still saving on 2s or 3s. Just to double down on the buffing abilities, he also takes Arch Contaminator as well. That should give the plague weapons that the Terminators are armed with reroll wounds. We've then got a more standard playcaster with Curse of the Leper and Miasma of Pestilence, a bit of mortal wound damage output and -1 to hit for an important squad, and Typhus, who's been the warlord with this, taking Shamble Rot for a little bit of mortal wounds, and he also takes Noxious Discharge as well, one that deals 1 mortal wound to an enemy unit and then another one to the ones nearby. He'll also be providing a very decent amount of combat damage too. Overall, this list is a lot more simple. A huge number of bodies to take objectives, and ones that can be surprisingly threatening to drag down elite infantry when they need to, and then some frighteningly destructive Terminator squads, fighty characters, and great buffing pieces all scattered within the horde. With all that OBSEC and all those mass bodies, the list should do very decently on primaries, I think, though perhaps having very little range damage indeed could be a bit of a weakness against certain armies. So let me know what you think then. Hopefully that's been interesting to look at 3 Death Guard lists that are really quite different in flavours. Even if they might not be one of the top tier codexes anymore, I still think that Games Workshop has done well to give them multiple strong ways to play. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the channel quite a bit, I would just like to mention that the channel does have a Patreon page, and if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is enormously appreciated. All the videos do take a fair amount of time to make. I do try and give channel patrons a fair few different rewards. You can see certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.